This is one of the heartening things about this generation of parents, is that we have the desire to want to be better parents and we want to work on it.
It's so amazing how they are acutely aware when they have been wrong. Like, hey, this is right, this is wrong.
Teaching our kids to learn to be kind with themselves even when they so-called lose, right? It's okay to lose, it's okay to make mistakes. That itself is kindness also.
Do you feel like now, because you're raising him to be kinder, do you feel like you are also kinder?
Yes, I feel like I'm also much kinder to myself. Because we always have these expectations of ourselves and no one ever taught us to be kind to ourselves.
Welcome back to In Motherhood, where every mama's story matters. Today we are talking about how we can raise kind kids in a world that is not always kind.
Hi, I'm Faustina, the founder of HiBuyMama. We create a range of busy books for our kids to help them with pretend play and imagination. And also we create emotional wellness tools under the brand Raising Resilient Rascals to help you, spark conversations about emotional literacy with our children, help them to raise them to be confident, resilient individuals that can face challenges in the future.
Let's start with how you begin HiBuyMama. What planted the idea in the first place for you?
Yeah, so HiBuyMama actually started with like busy books and toys. So really, that was more of finding meaningful play for children to flourish in their like imagination and pretend play, right? But as my son grew a bit older, I went more into the emotional wellness tools. That's where Raising Resilient Rascals came about. Yeah, and it really came from actually observing adults, not children. Adults throwing like adult tantrums. Sometimes,
we all know that one.
Yeah, sometimes it can be really over like really small things, like in the supermarket, they can't find something or something, for example. That's very, very small things. They throw adult tantrums. And that made me realize that, actually, most of the time it's because they didn't have the coping skills from young. Nobody taught them that. And I don't blame our parents' generation because they can't teach what they don't know. So that's why I wanted to create these tools to actually, provide some resources for parents now.
Was it the realization that you're like, oh, I have a child now, and if I don't teach my child this, he's gonna be this adult?
Correct, yes.
Throwing a tantrum?
Yes.
That was a fear that sparked it.
Correct. Yeah. And it's not just throwing adult tantrums. It's also like sometimes like getting really depressed over challenges. I mean, these feelings are all like messages from the heart, but if we are not careful, we can really sink in really deep. And I don't want that to happen for my child. Also creating the safe space to talk about some of these things, so that when my child needs help, or every child needs help, they can come back to their parents. So that's why I wanted to create these resources, not just to help parents to give kids skills that they need, but also to create a safe space for them to talk about things. Yeah.
Faustina, I would like to ask you, how do you see in all these years that you have created these products, 4 years now, how do you see play products nurture emotional growth and empathy with kids at home?
Yeah, I think for children, right, play is really very natural, and they do a lot of storytelling and pretend play with their toys. And really, most of the time when we observe how they play, we can see that kindness is always enacted, right? So they'll say things like, oh, this one, this animal is hurt, or this guy, he needs some help, how we help them. And then, maybe they come up with villains even. And always in the story, most of the time, they are the good guys, right? And then they'll try to help someone else. So I think it's very natural for children to be kind. And actually, through storytelling and imagination, that's how we can see how empathy becomes tangible. So I think play is a very important and crucial tool where we use to, give them the space, and then they will show you, what it means to be kind and what's empathy.
I'm sure many mamas will agree with you. But what does kindness mean to you? Beyond just saying please and thank you, kindness is beyond that.
Yes, actually, kindness has really evolved for me in motherhood. In the past, kindness used to be a bit more two-dimensional and one way. But really, after becoming a mom, kindness is really, to me, offering the kind of support, encouragement, comfort to someone else in the way that they actually need me too, rather than, just the way that I'm used to giving. So sometimes this means that I need to step out of my usual habits, because sometimes I think like we think that we want to offer kindness in a certain way. We think that it's kind, but it may not necessarily be kind.
Often the way we were raised shapes the way we then raise our kids, because so much of how we were raised influence our own approach to kindness and empathy. I would like to highlight the point that, not all of us can model kindness all the time, because
Yes,
we are
definitely, yes.
not perfect. So can you share a moment where you felt like you did not model kindness and you had to repair this relationship with your little one?
With my little one, yeah, definitely. There are times that, I'm not proud of, but I have lost my temper before. I think most of us experience it. I don't know, because sometimes I see and I'm like, oh, everybody seems to be so perfect. But the reality is, I think most of us experience moments like that. So I do get shocked with my boy, and sometimes impatient, like small things like rushing out of the house, or if I'm already so overwhelmed and then he does like this one thing, and then I can sometimes it really tips me
Yeah.
over, and I'm not proud of it. But our kids, they are always so forgiving, even when we
I
don't
agree.
deserve it, right? And then that makes
They
us
just
feel
love mama.
yeah, and then we feel so bad. But I will always apologize for what I have done wrong. And I think this is something also I think a lot of us are trying right now in this generation, is really to apologize in the proper manner. So like instead of like saying sorry because we think the other person wants to hear that, we actually say sorry because we really feel sorry, and then we will say exactly. So what I do is I say exactly what I'm sorry for. Like, I'm sorry I lost my temper. It's okay for me to be angry, but I shouldn't have behaved that way, and I hurt your feelings, that kind of thing. And I think this also shows my boy that, we are, number one, that we are human, we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And what is important is that we repair the connection. And I think to me, this is also kindness, right? It's like that we value the connection enough to want to repair it, and also taking responsibility for our actions, because there will always be times that we hurt someone else's feelings, or someone else hurts our feelings. Then what matters really is to repair the connection of them, and try to be better the next time.
I mean, just like a few nights ago, because my son likes to invite me to help him to play games, especially when it gets too hard for him. So, sometimes I get so caught up in winning that I'll be like, oh no, you did this wrongly, or you did that wrongly, and oh no, we lost because you did something wrong. And, he just have tears well up in his eyes because I hurt him. I said something that was super hurtful to him. And when I noticed it, my face immediately went red. I was like, oh no, what have I done? And now reflecting back and looking back at that moment, I should have said, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something differently, or what else can we do next time, And having this realization made me just remind myself to focus on not winning, but really just to bond with the little one. And that was more important. What's important is that he learns that working together is kindness as well. And even in that moment, it's kindness to myself, and apologizing to him will be kindness to him. Like, that's why your story is so relevant in that sense.
I think that's a very beautiful story, and I think a lot of us actually experience that. I think I can see this quite often in the current generation, right? That's where we get very reflective. When things happen, we actually think about what happened, and how we can be better the next time. And I think in that process, because we always fall back to our old ways, right? Sometimes it's just habit, but I think now we actually try to kind of like step out and then reflect back in. I think at the same time, this is the process of healing our inner child, right? Because sometimes these are things that,
our inner kid will come up, like the inner kid want to win.
Correct, yeah. And these are the things that happen in our childhood. Like sometimes, we feel like, oh, we really need to win. Because why? Maybe like we need to impress somebody, for example.
Yes.
We felt the need to, right? So sometimes we fall back on these things. But I think now, this is one of the heartening things about this generation of parents, is that I think that we really, we have the desire to want to be better parents, and we want to work on it.
Yeah, but kindness isn't simple.
Correct.
As much as we want to be kind, how if someone else is not kind back to us, when the world doesn't play fair? Have you had this experience?
For my boy, mostly it's like, for him, it's like, when they play and then, like they snatch the toys, that kind of thing. It's not really the big sense of like kind of, not playing fair. Sometimes he is the perpetrator, right? He snatches another person's toy. Sometimes other people snatch his toys. I'll just like, take him away and then we'll talk about it. I guess it's still early stages, but I do think about it often, like how do I teach him? Because especially since when I was a child, I struggle with standing up for myself. So I consciously try to think of how, I can educate him, how to stand up for himself. And we talk about it sometimes. So I'll tell him, I'll ask him, what happened, or maybe ask him about stories that happened in school.
If this story resonated with you, share it with another mama and subscribe to In Motherhood for more heartfelt conversations. Thank you. So you want to help him to stand up for himself as well?
Correct, yeah.
My husband is very tennis crazy. So the moment he turned 4, my son turned 4, he enrolled him into tennis classes. So this tennis class is for the age of 4 to 6. I didn't know this until much later, but the coach implemented games where there is definitely a loser. And at 4 years old, my son is just learning, he's getting big emotions and just learning. He doesn't know how to manage his emotions yet. So at this point, when he loses, the natural thing to do is he will cry, and he then gets this older kids, the 5 years olds and the 6 year olds, and the jump is quite big. They then don't cry anymore. They just move on with life, right? But they turn around and they point fingers and they say, "Hey, cry baby," blah, blah, blah. And when I saw this, I was so furious. I was telling my husband, I said, "Hey, your son is going to start hating tennis if you allow him to continue like this." Not only that, he's learning that it's not good to be in a competition, because competition is going to give him this fear, this shame, and that's all he will remember and take away from it. So I took him out. And I just said, why don't you do one-on-ones instead? You do one-on-one with him, and then, it can be a father bonding thing. And that's what we did. That's how we addressed it. It's something where we have to be aware of. And it's such a relevant topic to how we model this, because kindness is not just about, the please and thank you, but really how it shows up in our day-to-day life, right?
I think similar to you, my son doesn't really talk much to his classmates because his pronunciation is not as good as his peers. So I think that's why he's not
You
so
speak
confident.
Chinese at home?
No, speak English, but still he was a speech delay. So that's why, some of the words he's not so clear. So that's why he doesn't have much confidence in school. He talks a lot at home and, with adults, but not so much with peers his age. I can see why, you kind of put your kid out first so that, he maybe wait for them to get more ready, right? When they're a bit more emotionally mature.
Yes. I think at 4 years old, in terms of dealing with emotions, all they know is to just, I don't know how to deal with this. It's too much for me. So the first thing that happens is they let it out through tears. And you will see a lot of the younger kids, they cry first, they go through it, and they have big emotions. And they are just learning emotions as well. So then to bring my son into it's okay to lose, it's okay to lose. It's not about winning. It's not about winning. Also something I have to model for myself. It is a long conversation, and it begins at home. It has to start with the parents and how we share, how we see things, and through your play products, obviously, yes, I see that in play as well. When we're playing together and I have to say, hey, that's okay. You're playing and accidents happen. We can't always be perfect. And you learn how to distinguish, hey, this is a friend. It was playful. It was painful, but it was from playing. And then just to learn to let go a little bit. He's starting to get it, but there are moments where he goes, I'm not happy with that, that's not right. And it's so amazing how they are acutely aware when they have been wrong. They're really aware about hey, this is right, this is wrong,
I think also part of kindness is teaching our kids to learn to be kind with themselves even when they so-called lose, right? Because I think losing is sort of a way of learning. So I think when we make mistakes ourselves, we forgive ourselves. I think that also models to our kids that, it's okay to lose, it's okay to make mistakes. And I think that itself is kindness also. And hopefully that kind of flows through to, when they do have competitions and contests in future, that, it's okay to lose. It's just, it's learning. There's always someone who wins or lose, right? But I think losing is just a part of the process. And I think it's important to talk about it and, important for our kids to also learn, because they will always face challenges in future when they grow older. That's why we do this emotional education. We talk about these things because we want to educate them and prepare them first before we launch them out. You know? So now it's a preparation stage, so soft launch.
And when will you
we
ever
try the
be
soft
ready?
launch. Yeah, correct. So we'll never know when we'll be ready, but we just try our best.
Yeah, it's this ever ongoing tension between, hey, I want you to be kind, but then what if the world is not kind, and when you want to teach your kid to be fair, but the world isn't always fair, and when is actually, people are like, oh, they'll learn when they grow up, but actually you should expose them when they're younger.
That's absolutely right. That's what I really believe in. Like, sometimes people think that, things are natural, but actually things are not so natural. Kindness is not natural. When kids, they are naturally kind, but you don't practice it. It's not, because kindness is not just a thought, a feeling, right? It's an action.
I wonder if actually people are naturally selfish.
Actually, I think they are. Because evolution, right? We are meant to survive. You have to be selfish first. That's how you can survive. Then after that, you kind of move on to like other needs. You'll be kind. Because kindness is not just, okay, I'll be really honest. I don't think kindness is purely altruistic. It's actually something that makes you feel good also, right? So I think it's all rooted in some kind of selfishness. But we all want to make the world a better place for everybody, and that makes everybody feel good and makes everybody happy. So that's why we want to like pursue kindness. If the world is kind, it's a much better place for everyone to live in, right?
That brings us back to, in doing the work that you're doing now, what is your hope for this generation of kids?
I really hope that this generation will create a much kinder place. Everybody has a bit more understanding, empathy, support for each other, less judgmental and all that. And
I agree.
And everybody works as a
so
team.
much.
Everybody works as a team. I think in some way we are all
less judgy lah.
Yeah, less judgy. Yeah, and in some way I think we're all actually on the same side. Everybody just wants to be happy. We want to be successful in our own ways. I think everybody wants the same thing, and I believe that everybody can achieve that. We don't have to be in direct competition with each other, and I think that's the only way, because everybody wants the same thing. Nobody is going to get exactly what we want if we all work against each other. So to be kind to each other, not so judgy. Like last time, I used to judge people quite a bit. But after becoming a mom, I realized that, we are just all trying our best. And I think that's enough. So can be people kind towards each other. And sometimes, sometimes people are just having a bad day.
Well, for me, because I grew up in Malaysia, and in Malaysia, in our Chinese society, we feel like, we are a bit of a minority there. So we just help each other out. But when I moved to Singapore, I realized that there's this push to be better than each other academically. There's this childhood influence of, I need to be better than the next person over there, because that's what my parents want me to be, because we ultimately want our parents to be proud of us.
Yes, definitely.
And then when we grow up, we carry this into adulthood. So then the message today is really like, hopefully we can see we don't have to be so protective of our, like, the excellence that we need to portray, that we forget to be kind.
I think it's also taken me a long time to learn to be happy for the success of other people. I think last time, we used to be like,
That's
it's a
it.
competition.
That's so
We have
important.
to, someone is doing so well, then, where am I kind of thing. I don't think it's always a competition. And I think it's like, nowadays I try my best to like, oh, you're doing so well. I'm really happy for you. And I really can feel the kind of happiness for the other person. And I think that takes some like
Maturity.
inner work. Yeah, and inner work also. So something that we have to kind of constantly work on ourselves. I think there will always be, especially in like a pretty competitive society like Singapore, right? I think a lot of times you'll think like, you have to score really well, you have to perform really well academically and all that. And there will always be parents who want their child to focus on that. And I don't blame them, because it's really a competitive society.
But every parent wants their child to be the
Correct.
best.
Yes, every parent wants their child to be the best. That's definitely, because I also send my kid for enrichment, right? So I don't need to. Yeah, so I think yes, definitely. But I think also at the same time, I don't think some things, two things can be true, right? They can all do really well, and then they can all work together. So you don't necessarily have to be like better than the other person. You can help each other out. And sometimes you actually, in future, when you grow older, when you go to the workplace, sometimes you need someone else to help you, right? You don't really have to be in direct competition with another person all the time.
Synergies.
Correct, yeah, synergies. And also the other thing is like, I think that everyone is going to be raised differently, right? Every child, even in our children, this generation, right? So and if we do put in the effort to raise kind children ourselves, hopefully, that kind of like rubs off on the other kids. I think because, I think a lot of times we can see that, children, they learn a lot from their peers, the influencers. That's why we also try to protect our children, right? What they see, who they hang out with, we want to know. So I think hopefully, we just do what we can, in raising our own like kind children. And then hopefully they rub off, their friends, their peers, and then collectively they can be a kinder generation in future.
So have you seen, how your product, Raising Resilient Rascals, have you seen emotional growth happen in the kids using these?
Okay, so I came up with an example with my own son, right? So for example, my own son, we actually use these tools quite often. We started out with the emotion cards and then we move on to like the Emotional Explorers board game where we practice more empathy. Initially, I think, okay, so like one example would be some of the coping skills we learn, I'll teach him is like, pushing the wall to manage your anger or like, taking deep breaths. Sometimes it feels very futile because it doesn't happen. I think we always see that, be like, take deep breaths, but when it happens, he's not going to be taking the deep breaths.
It's a funny story. I tried that with my son because I'm trying emotional regulation with him. And then I find myself like flustered. And then he comes back to me and he goes, Mama, breathe.
Yeah, I think that happens. And it's like,
I'm so angry and I'm just like, I just want to say, shut up.
Yeah, but then we have to control.
Yeah, we can't say it out loud, but in my head, I'm just like, then I'm like, oh, so that's how it feels like, you can't just say breathe, like.
Yeah, so actually so like for my son, so like for the longest time we tried to do that and then like, it didn't click. But recently I tried it again, we're like take deep breath. And he actually does it with me like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that kind of thing. Yeah, so and then so it's like, oh, it's finally working. Yeah. So to parents who are also doing this thing, like trying emotional regulation with kids, just trust the process and, it will click in future. Yeah, we just give them the skills now and, teach them. And hopefully one day it's just...
And do you feel like now you're also, because you're raising him to be kinder, do you feel like you are also kinder?
Yes, I think, but I think for me, it's like, I feel like I'm also much kinder to myself. I think I used to be very harsh and have expectations. Sometimes I will be like, actually, I'm okay. I'm trying to do it. So I once saw someone do this, like, they're talking to themselves and like, telling themselves that they're doing great. And I'm trying to do that a bit more. So yeah, because we always have these expectations of ourselves and no one ever taught us to be kind to ourselves, right?
Faustina, you've spent so much and poured so much of your energy into building this work around kindness. Thank you for reminding us that kindness is not weakness. Kindness is strength. And it's something that we can model at home. It can take root even in our everyday, and it doesn't matter if we make mistakes, because in repairing that mistake, you are also allowing empathy to take root. Thank you for sharing your story. Is there anything else you would like to add?
So here's for example, this is our emotion cards from our emotional wellness range. I have also written a book, this one, Galileo and Galilei, Embracing Who We Are. It's a book about finding the true meaning of friendship and learning to love yourself and not to, change yourself to meet the expectations of others. Thank you.
Yes, I want to have a look.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I brought this then, it's actually for your...
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Steph.
For every mama listening, may you find hope in the ordinary moments, because this is where kindness grows. And often, our children can be our greatest teachers. This has been another episode of In Mother Words, where every story matters. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode.